Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar. My name is Ricardo Terán. I am the Title Sherpa and co-founder of Folio Title. It's a great pleasure to be here with you today and to have this very, very special guest. This is Denise Bermudez, one of the mortgage bankers at FEMBI, a direct lender here in Florida, a locally owned direct lender who has done amazing work for over 30, 40 years now, right?
Yes.
So Denise, it's a great to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Ricardo. It's my pleasure. I'm very excited to be able to share this valuable information with all of you.
I met Denise many years ago, and I met Fembi early on in my career, and was so impressed with their level of professionalism and knowledge in the local market. And Denise called me a few days ago after we did a closing and told me about the new Hometown Heroes program and how it changed. And we thought it would be a great opportunity to open up a conversation and bring knowledge to the table about the changes and the expectations of the new program. So let's kick this off. Why don't you give us briefly a little bit about your background, why you got into mortgages, and what is it particularly about first-time home buyers that really excites you?
Well, I've been in the business since 1982, so it's been just a short while. And I had the pleasure of actually starting in title, and then I went into mortgages. And one of the main reasons that I went into mortgages, Ricardo, was because I wanted to make a bigger impact on people's lives. And I actually love what I do, to be very honest. I must, right, after so many years to continue to do it. And it's wonderful to be able to overcome challenges with people who most first-time home buyers are under the impression that they can't buy. And so I like to make that difference. And there's nothing more satisfying than being able to tell them you're clear to close, you're getting your house.
Right. And you have a long track record, and most people think about history in very recent terms. So everybody talks about the changes in home values and how expensive Florida has become. But have home buyers always had the same kind of worries in purchasing their first home, no matter the cost of the property?
Honestly, no matter the cost, the market, what was going on, yes. Usually they're very nervous. So that's why it's so important. The communication, the education, and kind of like holding their hand every step of the way.
And we talk a lot about in our webinars about the power of the real estate agent inspiring confidence with their home buyers and bringing that team of people that would really guide those homeowners through those nerves, right?
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to have a good team. When you're working together in a team, everyone's on the same page, and that buyer can feel that difference.
Absolutely. So for those who have heard the name but don't really know what it is, what exactly is the Florida Hometown Heroes program, and what problem was it originally designed to solve?
Well, the Hometown Heroes program is basically a down payment assistance program, and where they can put it towards funds towards down payment and closing costs. So the huge problem that it was meant to solve and continues to solve, honestly, is buyers not having enough money saved to buy a home.
Right. And many people who are current renters, where maybe they originally put a first month and a last month in a deposit, and they don't have enough savings to then go and put it down payment because their money is tied up in the rental.
Correct, Ricardo. For example, nowadays, I'm sure you all know, let's just say a simple rent of $3,000 a month. That renter has to come in with usually $9,000 just to be able to rent. On a Hometown Heroes program, we have an example that I can tell you that recently we closed, and it was a purchase price of $480,000. And that woman with a $5,000 seller contribution, which nowadays, as you all know, there's more sellers contributing lately, is what we've seen. She was able to purchase her home with $5,000, only $5,000.
Right. Which for many people is something that they can attain, right? They sacrifice for a couple months, and 5,000 is attainable for many people, but 50,000 may not be.
Correct. And this woman, the purchase price was $480,000.
Right.
So to give you an idea, it was an excellent choice for her, and she was so grateful. You can imagine, over the top, has sent us many referrals because she couldn't believe that she actually finally was able to purchase a home.
Now, Florida Hometown Heroes as a program is not new, but it has had many evolutions, and it gets constantly funded and refunded when the funds are depleted. So it was relaunched a couple of weeks ago, and it has a lot of new requirements and characteristics. Why don't you walk us through what are some of the main things that have evolved over time, and what are the most important changes to the Hometown Heroes program in the current iteration?
Okay, well, first of all, the funds, there was $50 million put into the funds July 13th. So we're still pretty good. There's 40 million available still. So that means we're on time to be able to secure some funds. Now, what are the biggest changes? Very important. What I want to emphasize and leave with everyone today, it's not like in the past. We've been doing the Hometown Heroes for the last 4 years. Originally, it started out, Ricardo, with the very important job title, right? Well, if they were a nurse or if they were a doctor or what, depending on what their position was. Now, this round, they focus solely, or mainly, I should say, on who they work for, who pays them, and how do they get paid? Meaning, do they receive a W-2 or are they a 1099? That's the main focus. The employer is basically qualifying the borrower to be eligible for the Hometown Heroes program.
So just to make sure I understood, you could be a W-2 or a 1099 and still be eligible if your employer classifies you as a full-time employee.
You got it, Ricardo. That's exactly how it is.
Whereas before, just with your job title, you were eligible.
Correct.
So many real estate agents that knew the program before, one of the shifts, one of the mindset shifts that they need is to maybe change a little bit their approach and how they're going to pre-qualify or who they're going to actually offer this for.
Absolutely. And that's where the teamwork comes in, right? We have a checklist afterwards if they request that will also help them guide. We use as well to see if the actual employer is going to be one of the qualified employers. There's 7 categories right now.
Can you tell us what those categories are?
Yes, it's, let's see, healthcare workers, school staff workers, first responders, public safety workers, court workers, childcare workers, and veterans or service members.
Can we say that one more time to make sure everybody gets it?
Absolutely. So we have healthcare workers, we have school staff workers, we have first responders, we have court workers, childcare workers, and service members. Veterans.
So if you guys are writing furiously on your notes, don't worry. You guys can see the QR code on the screen. Make sure that you have signed up in the QR code because we will be sending out a recording after this video is done with a copy of the video, a summary of the video, and information that you will be able to pre-qualify those 7 categories.
Absolutely. And what I'd like the realtors to kind of like think outside the box. When you look at the categories, then you start thinking, well, okay, where can I go or what can I target or which employers can I target and present to them the opportunity that this is a benefit that they can give their employees. So it's going to make the employer look fabulous.
Absolutely. Now, are there any kind of income requirements on these 7 categories?
Absolutely. And the Hometown Heroes, it is by county. So for example, for Dade County, it's $204,300. So all the borrowers on the application cannot exceed that income.
$204,000 of gross income?
Gross income,
yes.
A year. And for Broward, it's $190,200.
We have people on the call from Naples, from Orlando. Can you guys shout out where you're from and let us know? You can put it in the chat, because what we'll do is we'll make sure that we can provide the income categories.
Correct.
Depending
on the
county, and that way everybody that is on the call will be able to get their county numbers once we send you guys so we have Osceola, we have Collier and Lee. Fantastic. Welcome to all of you. So talk to me about, if you're a realtor, what type of client immediately makes you think this buyer should be evaluated for Hometown Heroes?
Well, I would say any buyer that is in any of these fields, right? So for example, a buyer who works at a hospital or a school. For one of the main shifts, and again, I want to reiterate, in the past, it was like if you were a nurse, okay, then you qualify. Well, not necessarily. Now, if you're a traveling nurse, let me give you an example. Traveling nurse is one of the big things is you have to be able to report to a brick and mortar Florida-based company in one of those categories.
Right.
So a traveling nurse, because she travels and doesn't go to specifically one hospital per se, let's say, or clinic or doctor's office, then she wouldn't qualify. So you want to think of full-time, very important. That's one of the important categories, full-time. Now, who determines full-time? Not necessarily 40 hours. We all know that a lot of nurses work 3 days a week, right? But they are considered full-time. So the employer is the one that has to verify that they consider them full-time.
Particularly in the healthcare field, it seems that more and more there are healthcare professionals that are out on the street all day doing house calls, physical therapy, caring for the elderly. They may be independent contractors that even though they might work more than 40 hours, they're actually not full-time employees. They're outside contractors and vendors. And it seems that under these the new round of requirements, they would not qualify.
That is correct. If they're going to see patients at their homes, for example, and they're not going to a hospital or clinic, then unfortunately to a brick and mortar, they would not qualify. Now, if they did work, even though they were subcontractors and got paid as a 1099, but they did go to a facility per se.
So do you real estate agents be the ones to or would the real estate agent get the kind of information they need and bring in a mortgage banker, a mortgage broker early on in the conversation to explore the options?
I definitely would say bring in the mortgage banker early on. And one of the reasons for this is not only are we going to give you the security that you know that they will qualify, or if they don't, we have the opportunity in discussing with the client to give them different options. And this way, not necessarily lose the client. I really believe in always saying no borrower left behind. So even if they're not ready right now, we can give them a game plan. And do we need to sell every month? I think we do, right? So we get them ready, and before you know it, time flies, and you'll have another sale.
So many buyers, and I think the real estate agents here on the call could agree that they're very anxious about finding their home. So they want to go visit properties, and they're anxious because they want to see it and feel it. But the reality is, in these kinds of down payment and closing cost assistance programs, it seems to me that it is particularly important to get started early in the pre-qualification process, sometimes even before you're even taking the clients out to go see properties, because they start falling in love with the properties.
Most definitely. I would definitely recommend do not take them out until we give you the green light and the amount of the pre-qualification. I think that's key, just like in any other transaction, right? I'm sure that that's the way you guys handle it, but especially with the Hometown Heroes first-time home buyers.
Yeah.
We don't want to set them up for failure.
Now, talk to me about the point of view of the real estate agent. So most real estate agents will do a great job in helping their clients get pre-qualified. But the real estate agent also sometimes has their own, anxieties and their own insecurities because they're not experts in this process, and they want to be as helpful as possible. What ways can the real estate agent be most helpful in this pre-qualification process, preparing the client, either letting them know the kinds of documents they need or the kinds of timeline they need, or measuring the expectation of how long they're going to need in this pre-qualification process before they can start making offers?
Well, honestly, I would think the best thing is to let everyone do their job. In other words, because sometimes the realtors are so anxious that they overstep and maybe they say something that's not absolutely correct or discourage them. So again, I think it's to involve the mortgage banker early as possible in the process.
Awesome. Now, a lot of the possible, actually a very important question that we discussed before we went on was defining what a first-time home buyer is, right?
Great question.
There's a lot of confusion as to what a first-time home buyer is and is not. Could you give us the clearest definition in particular in relation to this program?
Absolutely. The definition for a first-time home buyer when it comes to the Hometown Heroes program is someone who has not had an interest in a property in the last 3 years and that it has not been their primary residence. So that's the little caveat, let's say, that we were able to discover in doing a lot of these loans. So there's some maybe elderly parents that put their adult children on the title of a home so that if God forbid something happens to them, the child is already on the title. Originally, most lenders thought that that would disqualify that person as a first-time home buyer. However, we have found, and we have closed many, where that would not disqualify that adult child as long as the adult child did not live there in the last 3 years.
Correct. So maybe the adult child lend their W-2 so that the parents could qualify.
And we're on the title.
And they were on title, but they were actually maybe renting another property.
Or maybe at the time they actually lived together.
Okay.
And that property, but life went on, they grew up or moved on, got married and lived and moved out.
Right.
So as long as they haven't lived there, in the last 3 years, they're eligible and they're still considered first-time home buyers.
There is a lot of realtors that are out there prospecting clients, and many clients are people who maybe are full-time but are still paid hourly.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of these hourly workers in the last couple of years have really made up a big part of their income with overtime. And some industries more than others are suffering from a reduction in overtime hours. So you're starting to hear a lot of people get back from their clients. Well, I don't know if I have enough money. I don't know exactly how I'm going to be able to look at the down payment. What kinds of tips can you give to real estate agents to help those clients work through those issues? Because they may actually be ones that are primed to qualify for this.
Right. Well, when it comes to overtime income, just like a lot of the other income avenues, lender is going to look for stability, right? So if there's a decline in the overtime, Ricardo, we probably won't be able to use it. What we use, and one of the documents that I always ask anybody who receives anything extra than their hourly pay, their regular hourly pay, is I ask for the last 2 years end of year pay stub. Why is this? Because as lenders, we're required to average out separately that overtime bonus, whatever income. And of course, during the process of the loan, we have to verify with their employer that it's going to be most likely to continue. So, but usually the borrower themselves will tell us, oh yeah, no, I get the bonus every year. Or no, yeah, it's seasonal. Maybe now the overtime's low, but in December it gets really busy. So that's why we do
The annual averages that
right.
out.
So we do a 2-year average with a year to date. Obviously, the current pay stubs need to support and to show that the overtime or bonus or whatever it is continuing,
Now, all transactions require a lot of coordination, but it seems that more and more counties and municipalities and cities have different home down payment and closing cost assistance programs, and they really require a lot of back and forth with a lot of different entities. The Hometown Heroes program seems to work a little bit differently in terms of the amount of people involved. In terms of the logistics, why does the Hometown Heroes, or what makes Hometown Heroes different from, say, a county assistance program?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, Ricardo. It's very important. One of the best things I think about the Hometown Heroes, number one, is like someone like us, we're a lender, so we handle the whole transaction. We don't have to send a package or wait for underwriting to an outside source, to the county or that particular municipality. The beauty of Hometown Heroes is we're totally delegated, so we make all the decisions right here internally. The other important factor is time, right? So we're able to close them very, very quickly, within 21 to 30 days. So no seller is going to be discouraged, let's say, from accepting an offer because the person is going for Hometown Heroes. And I think that makes a huge difference when you're negotiating sales.
That's a great point, because the next question that I had was, what kinds of tips can you provide real estate agents in terms of making offers, particularly that for people who are going to qualify for Hometown Heroes that may not be apparent to them on other transactions?
Well, I think that's a very good question. One of the things I would recommend and tips is when you're making your offer, I know that normally we like to put a larger amount or maybe even a second deposit to look more attractive. But for these Hometown Hero loans, I would not definitely put a second deposit if possible, and nothing more than maybe $5,000 or $7,000, depending on the purchase price range. Why? Because at the end, because closing costs are so reduced on these loans, and if there's a seller contribution, if by any chance, like in the example of the one that I talked about recently, the person already had $5,000 on deposit, she didn't have to bring any more money to closing. Had she had $10,000 in escrow, we would not be able to have given her that money back. We would have had to apply it to the principal balance of the loan. So it would be like a moot point. So we don't want borrowers who are counting every penny, putting too much money that they're not going to be able to get back.
Do you think that in any way could make offers less attractive?
It could. That's where the negotiation comes in, very important, and also why involve the mortgage banker early on, because many cases I have talked to the listing agent directly to give them the security that this is a fully qualified borrower and this deal is going to close. So that sometimes when that happens, it gives them the peace of mind. And we all know that even though it's the seller's final decision, that listing agent has such an impact, and that's why they're the professional that's guiding the seller. So it's very important that the listing agent understand and feel confident about the transaction.
So as Title Sherpas, we do our best to bring as much education to our audience. And what many of our, loyal and continuous participating realtors tell us is that when they go out on the street, they meet listing agents that don't have as much training or don't have as much information as they do about some of these programs. That's where I think having teams of professionals behind the real estate agent to speak to the listing agent, try to bring the listing agent up to speed in a way that gives confidence to the listing agent. That is where really the difference comes in when you look at the full picture of the transaction and the professional who is trying to make this happen for their buyer.
Absolutely. I think it makes a huge difference.
And it seems that these changes are going to make transactions smoother, where normally a down payment assistance program sometimes creates more uncertainty, especially when contracts have contingencies that correctly are trying to protect the buyer's deposit. But because there's a lot more things that can go wrong because of how many agencies are involved, real estate agents are just naturally trying to be as protective as possible of the deposits.
Absolutely. You're correct on that.
So talk to us about the communication, not just between the realtor and the mortgage banker, but from your perspective with title, particularly in terms of documents required and timeframes, especially because in title, many times, to not say most times, the process of title sometimes takes a little bit longer than the process of underwriting the loan. So usually the loan could be ready sometimes faster than title, and we still need some time. So that requires an enormous amount of communication, and the realtor is kind of stuck between two parties.
Middle. Absolutely. So that's why it's so important to work with a team that works well together, and so we know what to expect. And especially the title, Ricardo, as you know, sometimes has to depend on outside sources or outside municipalities on certain lien letters or what have you, so you don't have the full control.
Absolutely.
So definitely the teamwork, again, everything is communication. I'm sure you're all going to agree, if anybody who's had a transaction, if you have someone who's constantly informing you of everything that's going on, if something does come up, a hiccup, because it can happen, it's a lot easier to handle when you feel confident and you know that there's been transparency throughout the transactions thus far.
So what I want to do now is start opening up the mic to some questions. We have a couple of questions here in the chat. Thank you for sending those in. I'm going to start reading some of these to getting you some questions here. I see several counties that are joining. Welcome. We're going to send you guys a list of the income requirements in the different counties so that we can get that to you. Wow, we have Lake and Polk County, Orlando Market, Orange and Polk, Broward, Punta Gorda. Fantastic. Tashana asks, what about daycare owners or directors? Do daycare owners or directors fall into the qualified list?
Yes, they do, because absolutely, who pays them? I imagine the daycare, right? So yes, they would fall into the qualified list.
That'd be great. A great question from Marisol. Does a credit score apply to qualify for home tax?
Very good question. We haven't even touched on that. Absolutely. They need a minimum of 640 credit score in order to qualify.
Great. Great. 640 is a decent credit score, and actually nowadays, I think I shared with you the Avanti report, which Folio co-sponsors, where we have a graph of how much credit scores have grown into that territory. So that really should apply to a large portion of these workers. So it's attainable, right? It's not
Very
740.
Exactly. Very attainable, as a matter of fact.
Great. Let's see here. If someone is moving here from out of state but works in one of those categories, are they able to apply?
Well, they have to work for a Florida-based company.
Okay.
So it all depends. If they're moving here from out of state and they already are employed and can provide us pay stubs and verification, then yes. However, if it's like an offer letter situation, they would not qualify. They would have to already be living here, a Florida resident, and working for a brick and mortar Florida-based company.
So that actually gives me another question. When you talk about the evaluation of the 2 years of the pay stubs of 2 years, are both years needing to be from a Florida-based company?
No, they are not.
Okay. The
current employer, as long as they are in the same line of work, which is usually the regular guidelines for all loans.
Okay, these are great questions. Felix, you had your hand up. Welcome.
Hi, good morning, guys. Thank you for this wonderful training yet again. I do have a two-part question. Regarding the you mentioned brick and mortar, gotta be basically. There is some people that I know that are doing what is called non-emergency transportation, similar to a paramedic, but it's non-emergency. So they're not within the hospital or the facilities, but they do travel back and forth from in and out of them. Would they
They travel
qualify?
back and forth to the hospitals, and who pays these people?
So it's a company that basically works within contractual. They have
The contract
contracts with the
workers.
hospitals and living facilities.
So, in other words, because here it says borrowers employed full-time by a Florida-based fire department ambulance service or hospital are eligible. I would like to double check on that. I don't want to give you the wrong answer, to be honest, but
Okay.
maybe you can separately send in the question and the more details of the company that pays them, so I can verify for you guys. That's the other thing that's very good. We have a very strong relationship with the Hometown Heroes program. So anytime we always double check, because the last thing we want to do is have a disappointed borrower, right?
That's right.
So, on the screen, you guys, if you can read micro letters, I think you can see Denise's email. But definitely, if you click the QR code, you're going to get all this information, so you guys can run your specific scenarios through. Excuse me. What about registered behavior technicians?
RBTs. Yes, we have a lot of those. Again, Ricardo, what's the main thing here? The theme, who pays them? So a lot of them, for tax purposes, have created their own companies. So if they don't have a brick and mortar of their own company, they do not qualify.
Right. In this round.
In this round, that's a
Right.
big change. They were very clear. Last time it was kind of gray area. So they were they defined that for us.
Thank you, Felix. Any other questions? Christian, how are you? I know you have a lot of people there on your side. Marcelo, hello.
Yes, we are here, 20 plus people watching from the office.
Fantastic. I hope I look good. Any questions from the audience, Christian?
Not so far, just the question that you already met.
So I have a question here.
There's a question here at the office, Ricardo. What is the perfect model for RBT to apply?
So I guess it would be, it depends on who they work for, right?
Yes, absolutely. So where do they go? Who do they work for? Who pays them, number one? And where do they go to work every day?
Right.
Do they see patients at a facility, at a doctor's office, at a hospital, at a clinic? Or do they go to their homes? And if they go to their homes, then they would not qualify.
Right. And that basically also, on this round of Hometown Heroes, I guess, will probably disqualify people who work from home.
Absolutely. Very good question. As a matter of fact, all people who work remotely are not qualified for the Hometown Hero.
Right.
Now, if they're hybrid, meaning they go into their job 3 times a week, at least minimum, then they would qualify. That's
Right.
considered hybrid, right? Some days from home, some days in the brick and mortar. So keep that in mind. Yes.
Now, this round got seeded with $50 million.
Correct.
In 3 weeks and change, we're down to $40 million.
Correct.
So about 20% of the fund has been used in a very short amount of time. So obviously these funds, go quickly. What is the projected timeline of how long the funds are going to last for this round?
Well, this time they were telling us approximately, they're thinking January, that it'll last till January of 27. However, I would not waste any time and risk that.
Right.
And very important, so you guys know, in order to reserve funds for a borrower, we need to have a fully executed sales contract. Without an executed contract, we can't reserve the funds.
Right. So the timing of the pre-qualification and putting the property under contract is very relevant.
Yes, it is.
Okay, great. I have Ingrid Gilbert. Hi, Ingrid. Thanks for joining.
Hi, thanks for this presentation. I actually did the Florida housing presentation a couple weeks ago, and that was a lot of information in 3 hours. So
Yes,
I
I
think
bet.
confusing things, but you mentioned something earlier about you can be approved in 21 to 30 days, but then in my head with them, I have like 45 days. So I know the timing is very critical. And like you said, like you have to speak to the lender, know what you're qualifying for before you shop for properties. And then once you have that lease, there's like a time frame that you can get like one extension and then no more. So can you explain? Because I know I'm confused. I'm kind of mixing.
Oh, of course.
What's the
What you're
difference?
thinking, I believe,
Mhm.
is in reference as a lender, we have a certain amount of time from when we reserve the funds to deliver that closed loan. So I think that's what you're referring to.
Yes.
We
Yeah.
have 60 days to do that.
Okay, that's the
So
one.
that's right, right? And they allow one extension. But to be honest, in my experience, we haven't had to use that because we already know the timing. What do I mean by that? Let's say you send me a contract, it's fully executed, we put the loan into processing. Depending on where we're at with the funds, if like, for example, a time like now, or let's say there's still 30 million left or whatever, we don't immediately reserve the funds. We watch this on a daily basis. Now, once the funds are dwindling down to really low amounts, then there we will go ahead and reserve it up front because we don't want to risk that borrower not being able to get funds, and we just move extra quickly. But honestly, we don't need 45 days to close a Hometown Heroes. You can always feel confident to put 30 days on or before to cover in case everyone's ready earlier and they're agreed to close earlier, we close earlier. If not, 30 days is perfectly okay. We know how to time the reservation so we can deliver the loan in a timely fashion.
Okay, thank you.
You are.
So Ingrid, that's a great question. And I'm going to jump in here with my title hat on because
Okay.
what occurs many times is the buyer gets a great mortgage banker partner. They have Folio Title on their side. They're confident that we can close quickly. But it's not always the case that the buyer or the buyer's real estate agent knows what they're going to find on the seller's title. So, for example, if you make an offer on an estate where you have a deceased seller, or you make an offer where you have a foreign seller, or you make an offer where the seller is a corporate owned property, there are things that will impact the timeline
True.
on the seller side to be able to close. And when you are competing for these funds as it is, you're under a lot of stress and you have a lot of anxiety.
Yeah.
And the buyer doesn't always control the seller side of the transaction,
That is true.
right? So once you reserve the funds with a fully executed contract, is there a maximum time limit to close before that reservation goes away?
Yes, in other words, yet we have 60 days to deliver a closed loan, and they allow us one extension. So honestly, we don't have, after that extension, forget it. They won't be able to get the funds.
Mhm.
That's why it's not recommended like for new construction, because you know how new construction is. So it's so important. Again, we go back to the point of working together with professionals and a good team, because let's say, Ricardo, in this case, Folio Title lets us know, Denise, this one has a foreign seller. You know, once you see that it could take a little bit extra longer, the communication is so important so that we know how to time the reservation.
And I bring this up because this is crucial for real estate agents in their communication, buyer agents with listing agents. Why? Because many times the buyer's agent will send an executed contract to mortgage and title. Because mortgage has been pre-qualified, the client mortgage actually has a lot of information already about the client. There's a head start there. What happens on the title side? The buyer's agent is like a sitting duck. They're just waiting and praying that the title commitment will come back clean, and that the issues that the seller is facing are issues that the seller can deal with in this time frame, right? So for example, it happens many times where you make an offer and maybe one of the title holders is deceased and they have not started the probate process. That could torpedo your transaction.
Totally.
And so what we want to do with the real estate agents is, once the title commitment comes in, we try to deliver that title commitment within 24 to 48 hours to the lender and to the buyer, because now we need to have a conversation.
Right.
We need to have a conversation about expectations and what is possible. We need to make the listing agent part of our team. We're going to need the listing agent. We may need the seller attorney, because if that transaction doesn't have a good probability of closing, all that is happening is we are delaying an inevitable cancellation.
Correct.
And you're really, kind of disappointing your buyer with something they could not control.
And not only that they could not control, neither could the realtor.
Absolutely.
So we don't want, because let's be honest, buyers sometimes don't differentiate those type of things.
Yeah.
So we want to, take care of their reputation and trust, because that's the most important thing, right? With the borrowers.
Yeah.
So they continue to trust them. So yes, Ricardo, I agree with you. It's very important that the realtors, the buyer's realtor, learn to communicate very well with that listing agent from the get-go, and maybe even educate them, on certain things.
Right. And bringing in, professional mortgage bankers and title companies, what I believe distinguishes true professionals is the way they communicate what they find in a timely fashion, because we've worked with at this point over 900 mortgage brokers. And what I find is when we deliver a title commitment, most mortgage brokers take that and they just send it to the lender. They haven't actually gone through it, but it is very clear from that title commitment that there will be issues that need to be dealt with, where if you are thinking about a 21-day closing, it will be almost impossible.
Correct.
Another issue that we find a lot of times that is outside of the control of the buyer and the buyer's agent is the needs of the seller to move out of the property. Florida has an aging population. We are seeing a lot of properties that are maybe 30 or 40 years old, where there have been families who have been living in that property for 20 or 30 or 40 years. So selling this property is a major life event, and getting those people out of the property sometimes takes longer, right? These are just issues of communication. And in a program like this, where timelines are so important, these are the things that will differentiate a smooth transaction, a wonderful client experience, or a painful one.
Correct.
So, do we have any other questions?
I do.
Felix?
Yes. Right now that you mentioned that, the time frame is very important and that there's only one extension that's permitted for this particular loan. I'm guessing that with that being said, the type of property that us as real estate agents got to go out there and search for is houses that are habitable and insurable, correct? Because anything that has issues with structural or anything like that can obviously delay the process. But
not only delay, excuse me for interrupting, it could disqualify, right?
Okay.
Because that would be a problem. Yes.
And that extension that is permitted, which is only one, is there a specific number of days that it
honestly, there is, but I don't want to quote that until I double check. So we'll let you know that there is only one extension, but I'm not 100% sure how long that is. So like I said, we really haven't used it too much, thank God. So that's why, but I will provide that information to you.
We've prepared a couple of downloadable assets that will be sent to you guys, including all this information. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the elements of this conversation and all these missing pieces, we will write it in so you guys have full information. Ingrid, go ahead.
Yeah. Maybe it's in one of the assets already, but I've been thinking about like the buyer timeline and then the mortgage timeline, but obviously you bring in the title, which adds to that. So do you have an asset, or could you create one that kind of explains timeline in a perfect world, which I know there's no perfect transactions, but at least to give us an idea of how we want to prepare the client to say like, hey, you need to speak to the lender first, and then you need to speak to the title attorney, or bring in the title company at this point, so that we are educating them on the full process. And then they're not, because I feel like the timeline, you have to have your ducks in a row, you have to find the right property, and everybody has to kind of be on the same page. So we got to like front load all of that, so that they don't go like, whoa, what do you mean I need to do this? And, I wasn't prepared for that, and I don't have time for that, or things like that.
Yeah, that's a wonderful point. And I wish every real estate agent was asking that question, because it's extremely relevant for real estate agents, because they don't control the timeline of the lender. They don't control the timeline of title. What they can control is the transparency of communication, so that expectations are clear. And what is really happening is that all of these timelines are running in parallel. Some have different durations. So we have a policy where we order the title search within 24 business hours of receiving the executed contract. And we're trying to get back the title commitments within 24 to 48 hours of receiving the title search, which could take 3 to 5 business days. There are some title searches, maybe on a specific kind of property, that may take longer. So each transaction, and we say this all the time, every transaction is different, but definitely we will work on an asset. We have many, a lot of content that points to this, but maybe a simple one pager that kind of
Like a
shows
timeline?
those different timelines and how they overlap. I actually recently saw one from from one of the realtor associations, not in Orlando. This was in Southeast Florida. They had a graphic, and I always wondered why realtors, when they went to the association, had such little information about title. And they had a timeline in this association of realtors graphic, and it said right before closing, title gets ready for closing. That was the only mention of the title process, right? And so I finally was able to figure out that people misinterpret the timelines because from the realtor's perspective, they don't make you aware of them, right? And so coming to these webinars and trying to educate yourself in matters that are not directly property related or association related gives you a broader perspective of how to prepare the client without asking you to be an expert in mortgage or title, right? Without having to know everything about everything, because making you an expert in mortgage and title is not the point. The idea is that you can guide the client's expectations and experience so that when you do close, they continue to be a referral source for you. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I'd also like to add, Ricardo, that I did find that the loans that are not delivered within the 60 days in their guidelines, we have the 130-day extension.
Okay. So theoretically, you could get up to 90 days?
Correct.
All right. So that's a great point that now we have the
Uh-huh.
130-day extension.
So that one extension is for 30 days. And another thing that I would like to add in reference to closing costs that we haven't really talked a lot about is the closing costs are significantly reduced on these type of loans as well. There's definitely never no origination charges. That's not allowed. And the loans, both first and second, right? Because there's two loans. There's a second loan for the actual assistance portion. Neither one of them we charge or can charge the documentary stamps on the mortgage or the intangible tax.
This is a fantastic point because we didn't get to this during the interview. So many of you have taken the closing cost course that Folio Title put together. It's a short course, five videos in less than 5 minutes, and it gives you a breakdown of closing costs. And in that course, which by the way, if you want to sign up for the course, it'll be part of the email. It's completely free. That course breaks down closing costs by category, and it shows that many times the title and recording portion of the cost add up to anywhere between 0.5 point and 1.5 points. And then the other portion, which is the lenders, fees and costs associated with lenders, could add anywhere from about 0.5 point to 1.5 points. So in those two buckets, when you reduce the recording fees on not the recording fees, excuse me, the intangible taxes and the documentary stamp taxes on the mortgage, that is going to significantly lower the percentage of closing costs.
Ricardo, it's actually 0.55, the sum total.
Correct.
So yes, it is going to make a huge difference on the closing costs and the cash that the borrower needs to bring. So again, what's the biggest obstacle with this whole objective is people who have the qualifications, but they can't save the money, right? So it makes a huge difference.
And on a normal average purchase price in any of the counties that you guys are in, this is a couple of $1,000s for closing. Correct. This is why Denise was saying, if there's too much deposit and you're able to get a seller contribution, because the closing cost is so much lower, you don't want the buyer to have too much money on the table in escrow. What's really interesting and differentiates this round of Hometown Heroes, and this might be a little bit too inside baseball, but hopefully you guys will appreciate this, is that most down payment assistance programs that counties, municipalities, and cities offer only waive the intangible and doc stamps on the second loan. In the Hometown Heroes program, in this iteration, they are also waived on the first loan, which is the bigger loan. So this adds up to an important amount of savings that could be one entire percentage point of all the purchase price, right? So
Correct.
it's a lot, many thousands of dollars of savings. So that is a great point.
Something else I wanted to add, we all usually, I see, we have transaction fees, right? Your real estate transaction fee. So the Hometown Heroes allows a maximum of $500 on that fee. Just so you
Fantastic.
know, a buyer that cannot use the funds of the down payment assistance for any real estate commission, just so they know as well.
So any buyer paid commissions, it's still coming out of pocket.
Yes, keep that in
Okay.
mind.
That's a great point. And buyer broker commissions the funds can be used for up to $500.
Correct. Not commissions.
Excuse me,
Transaction
additional
fees.
transaction fees.
Right.
Okay. That's very important. That's very important. And I know we have people from many brokerages here. So that's a point of discussion with your broker. If it's over 500 maybe, or that you understand that this, if it's under 500 would be eligible. So we promised you guys about 45 minutes and we just hit the time. I want to invite everybody who has questions to jump in. We have Betty Gertz. Hi, Betty.
Hi guys, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Betty.
Hi. I'm sorry. I know I have a question, but I know Ingrid would raise her hand first. So Ingrid, you go first. I just want to say hi, but after you finish, I'll go ahead and ask my question.
Thank you, Betty. Ingrid.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
I know I have a lot of questions, so I don't mind if he was trying to jump over me. But just you mentioned like new construction not being a good fit usually because of timelines. How are condos performing in these programs or townhouses because they have
That's an excellent question.
this and all that?
Honestly, we're at the mercy of the condo association, our amazing condo association people. So some of them, we have to be very on top of them. Luckily at FEMBI, we have a department for condo approvals on any transaction. But yes, keep in mind that it depends. We're kind of at the mercy of the association on returning that condo questionnaire. I'm not going to tell you to shy away 100%, but I will tell you that it's another challenge another hoop that we have to jump through.
Something that we recommend to buyer agents looking into condos is doing your research into the condos and finding information that most buyer agents don't go the extra mile to find. For example, if you look at the history of the closed properties over the last 6 to 12 months on the MLS, you can see what kind of financing was used in that condo. If you see that 90% of the transactions were cash, you immediately have an indication that that condo has some trouble getting financing, right? So, forget about Hometown Heroes. You might not be able to get any kind of financing on that condo. The other thing is, again, we're back to listing agents, and many of you on this call may be listing agents. So these are tips for you as well when you're selling in a condo. There are many listing agents that are really not that well prepared to understand the condo they're selling. They haven't really worked with their seller to gather some key documents that they know is going to be required during the due diligence period. And the problem with that is that it will delay the due diligence during the contractual period. So if you're thinking of using Hometown Heroes, because we have a very compressed timeline, we really don't have the luxury of stealing days from the transaction to try to get all these documents together. So you really need to consider when making an offer and speaking to the listing agent and trying to get ahead of some of these condo issues. For those that don't know, if you go to the Folio Title blog, we have a phenomenal blog post in English and Spanish that gives you tips of what you need to do for a successful condo offer. It explains the condominium documents, what each of the condominium documents means, what the additional document means, and their implications for financing. So we're gonna send it out with our post webinar newsletter, so you guys have that fresh. The condo tips in the Folio Title blog will help you understand as a buyer's agent what are the kinds of questions you're going to ask before you make the offer that will give you the best chance to close something like Hometown Heroes and condos.
And any particular loan, really.
Absolutely.
We usually, that's what, like I said, we have a condo department. So if you're able to get upfront, for example, things like the budget or even the insurances, I can have that reviewed to make sure there is no problems with the coverages.
That's a great question, Ingrid. Thank you.
Yes.
So Betty, the floor is yours.
Thank you so very much. Okay, so I came in late because I had trouble logging in and I did not hear the first 15 minutes of the call. Question for you, Denise. Is there a price range top that we can offer as an example? Because I do have a couple of listings that they're starting on the 642,000 plus. So would that be something that is okay or not okay?
No, that would be okay, because basically under the Hometown Hero umbrella, we have both FHA and conventional. So what's going to regulate that is going to be the maximum loan amount. So in FHA, the maximum loan amount, it goes by county. So for example, in Dade County, it's 667, right? 667,000, and conventional would be 832,750. So as long as the loan amount is in those ranges, and the person can put the difference, if the price is even higher than that, then we could go ahead and do the loan. Yes.
Perfect. So it comes to my next question. You were talking about the new construction, of course, because of the timeline. However, these 3 properties that I have, they are ready for closing. Yep. And what I love about this, and I'm telling you out loud, one, because it's a question, but also because there's a bunch of realtors in the house. And on that house, on the properties, the 3 properties that I have that are available for sale, they're pretty much ready for closing immediately. And the developer is paying either most or all of the closing expenses of these properties for the buyers. The only, obviously, the lender has to be the preferred lender, who happens to be Denise. So
we're one of them, yes.
Exactly. So would this all apply, and can we maybe do something where maybe these properties that are obviously brand new construction, but they're perfect for that program? Is that something that we can kind of like do together, or?
Yes, absolutely, Betty. As a matter of fact, when I said shy away or not so great for new construction, what I was referring to is like a property that's not built yet because of the timeline. But absolutely, we can do that, and we can apply the funds towards the down payment.
Perfect.
If the seller is already, the developer in this case, is paying the closing costs.
Perfect. Sounds good. Okay.
So yeah, we can do that. And also something that I'm not sure we really touched upon, and the additional information will have it, but keep in mind the minimum down payment assistance amount for Hometown Heroes is 10,000, and the maximum is 35,000. And what determines the amount of the down payment assistance? It's going to always be 5% of the first mortgage loan. So if the person is borrowing 500,000, for example, so it's 25,000 the assistance. So it's going to be 5% of that first mortgage loan.
So the bigger the house, or the bigger the purchase price, and the bigger the loan, the bigger the help.
Correct. With a maximum capped out at 35,000.
At 35. Okay, thank you.
And as a reminder, if you did join a little bit later, please make sure you have registered with the QR code if you hadn't done so before, because you will get a full copy of the video recording and the summary of the call. Well, I wanted to thank everybody for coming today and participating. What we are constantly trying to do at Folio Title is guide real estate agents and mortgage brokers through successful, wonderful real estate closing experiences with their clients and build a strong referral base. That's why we're the Title Sherpas, and we love working with first-class professionals like Denise. I really appreciate you coming on today to sharing your extensive knowledge. Thank you all for joining us today. We hope to see you at our next webinar. Please invite your friends if you have other real estate agents and mortgage brokers that you think would like this kind of content. We love when the community joins us and brings their ideas. We are, at the end of the day, a community that depends on each other to build successful real estate experiences and build successful financial wealth for both our clients and our families. So we really love having you all, and we look forward to seeing you guys again soon. Have a wonderful day.
Bye-bye.